Hello, my name is Louise Legein. I'm working at Oxfam Belgium and I am part of the SWIFT project, in which I more specifically look at European agricultural policies to see how they can better integrate gender. You might wonder why look at gender? Well, policies might seem to have no impact on gender, while trust me, they do. For example, in the Common Agricultural Policy, the CAP, many payments are area-based. But we also saw that women and LGBTQI plus people and new entrants, they have less access to land, which means they also tend to manage smaller farms. Another example that the Wageningen team highlighted is that the criteria to be considered as a young farmer and thus receive young farmers support, it includes requirements to be head of the holding and to have some kind of agricultural diploma. But we also observed that, for example, women, they are less often head of the holding and they have less access to training and agricultural education. So, what is the current situation? Well, the European Commission has committed to implement gender mainstreaming in its policies. In the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, there is a specific objective including gender equity, but it's not the only target of this objective. Which means that, for example, in Poland, in the Polish National Strategic Plan of the CAP, there is nothing to address gender inequalities. In the Austrian one, they focus more on work-life balance and also to the access in rural areas to services. In Spain, there is an additional support for women in the young farmers support, but it's area-based. And as we said earlier, it discriminates people managing smaller farms, so often women. So, what do we suggest? In the Oxfam Confederation, we have looked at gender-responsive budgeting and its potential to make policies more gender transformative. It means looking at the root cause of gender inequalities and address them in policies. What is gender-responsive budgeting? Well, it's looking at how gender is implemented and can be integrated at every step of the budgetary process. So, designing it, the validation, the implementation, and the monitoring. It doesn't mean a specific budget for women. And it's also very interesting because it helps to make a more efficient use of public money. Now, how to implement gender-responsive budgeting? As we said, it's important to do this to address structural inequalities and to know what are the needs of the people concerned. So it's important to have consultation of women and other marginalized people. It's also important to implement gender-responsive budgeting at various levels. At local level, it helps people to get familiar, so both citizens and policymakers, with the tool. And it's also important, especially in the case of the CAP, that is decided at both levels to implement gender-responsive budgeting at member state level and at EU level. Another important aspect is that the people in charge of implementing and designing the CAP, they need to be aware of the importance of addressing gender inequalities, so they need training on gender inequalities. What is also important is that gender-responsive budgeting is codified in law. Otherwise, the risk is that with every change of government, the measures in place are unraveled. And finally, it's very relevant to have an oversight body with powers that is able to give sanctions in case gender-responsive budgeting is not implemented or not correctly, and that is able to give binding recommendations. So, to conclude, we recommend that, and we strongly recommend that gender-responsive budgeting is implemented for the next CAP, and that for every intervention, gender inequalities and structural inequalities are taken into account in the design of the next CAP. If you want more info on this subject, we have written reports on it. So you can find them, or you will find them on the SWIFT website. Thank you for watching, and maybe see you soon.